Thanks for your support as a channel member, Sean MRV. It was McLaren's Lando Norris who took pole position and eventual victory on the streets of Monte Carlo to close the gap to Oscar Piastri down to just 3 points in a race where every driver had to make at least 2 pit stops. Did that new rule work? I think yes, and I also think no. Hello folks, welcome back, and today I'm going to give you my thoughts on the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix won by Lando Norris. And as I said, the 2-stop rule, it both worked and didn't work. Let's get straight on into things with Lando Norris. He took a sensational pole position. Saturday in Monaco is always more spectacular, more enjoyable because the drivers are pushing to the limit. You really see the cars thrashed around the streets of Monaco, and you see the skill that it takes to get it right. And some drivers get it wrong. Kimi Antonelli hitting the barriers at the Nouvelle Chicane and ending his session in Q1, even though he had qualified for Q2. So that was the Mercedes driver on the back foot. But Lando was absolutely spectacular. His first pole position since the opening race in Australia. And it had to be a terrific lap because Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, having played down their chances ahead of the weekend, were very strong. Leclerc is a magician around Monte Carlo, and he showed it again. He extracted all the performance out of the Ferrari and gave it everything he had, I think. I don't think there was much more that the Monegasque driver could achieve with that machine, but Lando put together a sensational final lap in qualifying and got the pole position, and pole position is crucial in Monaco. I mean, it doesn't always have the success rate that it should do because, you know, you can break down and crash and things like that. But recent history shows that with the cars the way they are, because they're so big, even if you lose 160 brake horsepower like Daniel Ricciardo did in 2018, you're probably going to win the race if you're in first, as long as you don't crash. And they avoid crashing by driving seconds a lap slower. So Lando controlled the race after winning the start. Leclerc gave it a really good go. And we saw in the F2 race how wrong it can go at turn 1 if the lead pair tangle with Victor Martins and Alex Dunn, colliding and triggering a bit of a pile-up at turn 1 in the morning race for the Formula 2 feature race. But Lando, once he was ahead, never really troubled, let's be honest. Charles got close when they were stuck behind Max Verstappen, who was hanging out for a red flag. At no point did I think, yes, Charles is going to get past, because it's just not possible. If you've got similar performance and the tyres don't degrade, it's just not going to happen. And that's why the 2-stop was brought in, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But this result is huge for Lando because it brings him 3 points behind Oscar Piastri. The Australian had, by his own admission, a scruffy weekend. And it was a scruffy weekend for the championship leader. I thought he would be the man to beat. He's looked pretty much at one with that McLaren all season, barring the little rain shower in Australia where he lost control and then slid into the grass, and his hopes and dreams of a home win completely evaporated. But it just didn't seem to come together for him this weekend. It was weird. And Lando was just spectacular. This is the Lando Norris I think we all expected to see this season. The one that would just qualify on pole, have a bit of an edge over Oscar, and win the races. But it hasn't quite worked out like that, and that's the beautiful thing about sport. You can never quite predict what's going to happen. As much as we make videos about it and fantasy leagues about it all, we can never truly predict what's going to happen, even at Monaco. So, for Lando, it's an important victory because it just halts that momentum of Piastri. And look, Lando is now 3 points behind Piastri, a quarter of the way through the season, a third of the way through the season. And this is after he's had a bit of a run. It's just not been plain sailing for him. He's had some difficulties. The Jeddah crash, Miami going a little bit down the pan with that scuffle with Max Verstappen on the opening lap. There have just been some things that have not gone quite the way that he would have wanted to. And yet, despite having only 2 wins to Piastri's 4, he's only 3 points behind in the title race. So he must be doing something right, because Piastri hasn't scampered off into the distance. Obviously, the big gulf in points in Australia has helped in that sense, given him a bit of a cushion, because it was 25 versus 2, so Piastri immediately had to gain 23 points. Not easy to do in the same car, but credit where credit's due to Lando. He's put it on pole in Monaco, the most important pole position of the year, converted it to victory. Now, if he goes to Spain and can put it together, he can leave this triple header in the lead of the World Championship again. So it's not all doom and gloom for Lando Norris, and it's not all, wow, Oscar's got this sewn up, because it's not. That car is so good, and it's one mistake. If Piastri gets it wrong, if he has another scruffy weekend, if Lando makes a mistake, if he crashes out in qualifying, it hands the initiative to the other driver, and that's the beauty of sport. I mean, as much as it's going to be fun with Max Verstappen just being a menace in third place in this championship, sniping off wins where he can, I think eventually it's going to come down to the two McLaren drivers, and they're going to have to start looking at each other, and things might get a little bit tasty. Should be good fun. So a very important win for Lando Norris. Let's touch on the two stops, the good and the bad. Good, made the leaders push. They went for it because they couldn't just make one stop and then that was it. They knew that they had another opportunity to try something, try and undercut, try and overcut. There was always that game at the front, and it just made it a little bit more interesting, I suppose. But then, obviously, after the second stops, it kind of settled down into the usual Monaco procession, except Max Verstappen was hanging out for a red flag. He didn't get it, but had it arrived, it turns everything upside down. You never know. He was trying to force Leclerc and Norris into battling and crashing into each other, but it just didn't quite work out. And fair play to Red Bull for trying it, because by that point, you're fourth, and if you stay out, you could be first, but if you pit, you're going to be fourth anyway. So that's racing. You've got to take a gamble. You've got to be in it to win it. So it didn't work out on this occasion for Red Bull. It might work out for them on another occasion. But the bad side of the two stops was the shenanigans played in the midfield. Look, I'll go on record and say I don't blame the teams at all for it, because any rule change has unintended consequences. It's just, that's life. You can't get it perfectly right, ever, because it's just not possible. So the unintended consequence was that teams that had two cars in and around the top 10 backed everybody up with the second car. Racing Bulls did it first, Liam Lawson playing basically the Kiwi Minister of Defence for Isaac Hadjar, who then made his two pit stops, finished in incredible 6th place on his first F1 visit to Monaco. Bear in mind, Hadjar was on course to win the Formula 2 feature race last year until a late virtual safety car was called, although Zach O'Sullivan nipped in to the pit lane beforehand and stole the win, meaning his pit stop counted in that race rather than it didn't, because you can't pit under VSC in F2. And Red Bull Racing Bulls absolutely smashed that strategy, because not only did it land Hadjar 6th, Lawson was able to then pull away and collect 8th place because Alonso broke down, and Williams then played the same game. Carlos Sainz driving slower than a slow thing so that Albon could get his two stops done. And then they swapped positions and did it all again, and then George Russell just cut a corner. It was quite funny, but it's farcical that we've got the best drivers in the world and they're poodling around at like a snail's pace. And it just goes to underscore that F1 has outgrown Monaco. The spectacle of it is no longer enough, really, because the racing action on a Sunday is dire. Qualifying is incredible. It's the best qualifying session of the season. It's then the worst race of the season, because you just cannot race anybody. Even with the tyre strategy, it didn't work. Martin Brundle was saying on the Sky Sports commentary, maybe make them have to stop by lap 20. But I think that there'd be unintended consequences around that. Maybe the backing up would just be even more severe. They'd drive even slower. So it's a catch-22. What do you do? How do you solve a problem like Monaco? maybe you just have to move on from Monaco, because if anyone suggested that idea nowadays, they'd be laughed out of the room. It's only because we've been going there for decades that they go and do it. The paddock's not big enough. The F2 paddock is in a car park where they have to drive through a tunnel away from the circuit. It's bonkers. Any rule change has unintended consequences, but the teams, they're fighting over tens of millions of dollars in prize money. So I absolutely do not blame them, because if the shoe was on the other foot, all the teams that were stuck behind Lawson and the Williams cars would have done exactly the same. So yeah, it's the only saving grace was that the front teams, McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull didn't have two cars in the equation, so they could never pull it off. The front teams didn't resort to this sort of tactic, which would have just killed the entire race. But yeah, all we can say is they tried it. They'll take it away. Is there a way it can be refined and done better next season? We'll see. Last thing I'm going to mention before we move on to driver of the day and race rating, Charles Leclerc. I said when I was talking about Lando Norris in qualifying, Leclerc is a magician. A very good weekend on home soil. He wanted that win so desperately, but you could just tell in his team radio in qualifying that he knew that qualifying lap wasn't quite good enough, and it was vulnerable to the McLarens. And then, yeah, it's a shame, but that's the way it is. McLaren have the best car. Ferrari aren't quite up there, so they could hope for taking pole position in Monaco and winning. Will they win somewhere else? Maybe Hungary or Singapore if they have a really solid race there and there's a bit of craziness, but I think it might be a winless season for Ferrari from here. But never say never. You know, the top three could all break down in Spain and Lewis Hamilton comes through and wins the race for Ferrari. You never know. So we shall see on that. Now, alternative driver of the day. I think Charles Leclerc got it in the end from the official fan vote. Don't ask me why. Because he did nothing. He did a good job. He finished the race in second place. But first of all, Lando Norris won the race. He should have been ahead. But also, this guy that I'm about to mention, Liam Lawson, was the driver of the day. Now, why was he the best driver on the track? Because he drove the slowest, which is a ridiculous thing to say. But he drove so slowly that he allowed his teammate to get the big result, and then Lawson basically sacrificed himself. He did a job for the team with no upside for himself. He held everybody else back so that Hadjar could get the big points. Yes, Lawson finished 8th. He would have finished 9th without Alonso breaking down, but he benefited from the Aston Martin saying, "I've had enough." And look, he's had a really difficult start to this season. But credit where credit's due. He did a job for the team. Fair play to Liam Lawson for that, because I'm not sure everybody would have done that without any upside, because you saw the Williams drivers swap around and return the compliment and then swap back again. But I'm not sure others would have done it with no upside for themselves. So we commend Liam Lawson for his team play and sportsmanship on race day in Monaco, and for driving like an absolute snail. Rating the race then, look, honestly, a Monaco with like one overtake on the track is a 1 out of 10 race. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 because the two stops just made it slightly more interesting to watch. Like, it wasn't, okay, we've seen the one pit stop and that's it, it's done. We haven't just seen the leader crawling around and blocking everybody and then dart off, get the gap they need, and then yeah, it was just slightly more interesting. The drivers at the front pushed a bit harder, and there are so many things we can take away from this. Is Monaco fit for F1? Is F1 fit for Monaco? Probably not. But they tried. They tried something, and that's better than doing nothing at all. So that brings me to the end of my thoughts on the Monaco Grand Prix. Let me know yours in the comments. Tell me how you'd rate the race out of 10 and who was your alternative driver of the day. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you for some Spanish Grand Prix predictions later this week. You're the best fans. It's bye for now.